so much, Senator Scott Brown, for coming out to support me today, and thank you all so much for coming out. It's great to see so many familiar, friendly faces in the crowd, but also so many that I haven't met before. And like Scott said, we've got independents here, Republicans, Democrats, all looking for a change up on Beacon Hill, and it's 50 points down and 45 days to go, if anybody's counting. So we're running hard, and you know, we don't rest. We can't rest until, like you said, maybe 10 o'clock on November 2nd. Now, for those that I haven't met before, I do want to spend a little time, let you know who I am, what I'm about, and why I'm running to be your state representative for those that are in the district, which includes the towns of Lunenburg, Shirley, Harvard, Lancaster, Acton, and my hometown of Boxborough. And if you didn't grab my information card when you came in, the reason I'm running is the picture on the back. We've got 3 young children in the public schools, and like many of you have your own children, you have grandchildren, or for yourselves, I am very concerned about what's going on at the national level and at the state level, particularly in the area of debt. We are loading down, doing something unconscionable, loading down our children and grandchildren with debt. And that's not just hyperbole. Here in Massachusetts, the numbers are that we're number 2 as far as a state government that's putting debt on the citizens. We have over $4,600 of debt per person, every man, woman, and child, just put on you by the state government. And I'm concerned that if we don't go down a different path, we are certainly on an unsustainable future, and we have got to face up to the challenges that we have, and we must do something about it. And I think most of you feel that way. We are truly at a crossroads. We were at a crossroads a year ago today when we were out there running around getting those thousands of signatures to get Scott Brown on the ballot, because we wanted to send a signal up to Washington that this out-of-balance situation isn't going to work. We want balance. We want people working on our behalf to face up to these tough challenges. So that's why I'm running for the children that I have, look out for their future. I want them to be able to stay here in Massachusetts. I want them to have good jobs, to be able to afford to live here. And right now, we're on a path that's set up where that's not going to be the case. The other reason that I run, I tend by nature not to be a bystander. I hope that my wife would attest to that at home. Hopefully in my career, where I've been with IBM for 20 years, my colleagues and my customers would agree with that. And that's what I want to do. Rather than just complain about all the problems we have, I want to take my unique background of 20 years in the business world where we know how to fix things, we know how to reform things, and I want to take that skill up to Beacon Hill to go work on these challenges. We can't just continue to talk about them and kick that can down the road. We have to face up to those challenges. So just to talk about a few things we hear over and over is balance. It's on my card, you're here, Scott's already talked about it. We know here in Massachusetts the problems of having a one-party rule state government. We've seen the corruption that it breeds, the arrogance it breeds, changing election laws and things like that, ignoring the will of the people when they pass a state referendum to lower taxes. It's not a good situation. But I am not just talking about the balance of one-party rule when I mention that. It's also the balance of the type of people that we send up, the background and experience that we bring to the job. Now, right now, there's some wonderful attorneys out there. I know a few, and I'm not talking about all attorneys, but we have a state house full of attorneys and full of, and I love locally elected government officials, appointed or elected. You're sacrificing, you're volunteering your time. But when we have people that get elected and then move up with no other perspective, no professional background and experience, again, it leads to a situation where we've got one mindset, attorneys and former local officials, and if that's all we needed up in the state government, I don't think we'd have the problems that we have. We wouldn't have the situation with runaway debt, with a business environment that's not friendly, with them not looking out for ways to spend our tax dollars more wisely. So I bring a different background. Again, 20 years of experience in the private sector, knowing how to fix things. In my world, we're not always around the table arguing with the other side. We got to learn how to collaborate. We are all in this situation together in this state. Everybody out here who's Democrat, Independent, Republican, we have huge problems, starting with a $2.5 billion budget deficit next year because we've been using stimulus money to balance the budget. So you need to figure out next year, do we want to go down the same path? And what did they do in order to help balance the budget? We talked about reforms before revenue. They made, I'll call them cosmetic reforms. Pension reform, transportation reform, ethics reform. that in a large sense, only in ethics, it just closed the most obvious loopholes, like you don't give someone a full year credit on their pension system for working 1 day in a year. In the transportation reform, you don't take 3 agencies and on paper combine them into one. You save a little bit of money because you've restructured some debt and some health insurance benefits, but you still have the same number of people working in the transportation agency. You still have the same size budget. That's not true reform. So we need folks who if we had, and then pension reform. You know, if we made obvious landmark pension reforms, we wouldn't still be facing a $22 billion unfunded liability. So we're going to have to go back and do all these things again. And that's where I encourage you to listen to your candidate for governor, Charlie Baker, another man who knows how to fix things. And you need to have him, yes, absolutely. But we've seen what happens. You can't just send a Republican governor. He needs foot soldiers. There's a whole slew of us running for representative and Senate. Some are in the audience. And I hope that you will get a chance to talk with them and then vote for them, support them, help them in the next 45 days. We need a whole slew of us that are willing to come to the table, look at these problems, say we can't continue the way we are. We are going to reform our state government. And we have to talk about real reforms. Again, whenever you talk about what I support, lowering taxes, well, what are you going to cut? What are you going to cut? There are some great ideas, some obvious things we can do to help our municipalities, for example. Let them have the authority to design their health care plans without union approval. Get rid of project labor agreements where the unions that have 20% of the construction jobs in Massachusetts get 95% of the jobs and the largest jobs run by the state. We need to do these common sense things. And of course, there's going to be a lot of resistance. I realize that every budget line item has major advocates, and that's been part of the problem up on Beacon Hill and in Washington. We need folks that are going to go up there to be your independent voice. I want to be your voice, not the voice of a union or other interests in Boston. I want to look out for what's best in my district. So you need leaders who are going to go up there, face up to these problems, and come to the table and realize Democrats, independents, Republicans, we got to all work together to work up to these challenges. And the last thing I'll talk about is business. As I'm talking to voters at the band concerts out here in Lunenburg, at the bonfire, all around the district, on the phones, number one issue is jobs in the economy. And you, again, when you have we talk about a clear choice that you will have on November 2nd. You have a group of people up in the State House, from the governor to the leadership, the Senate President, the House Speaker, my opponent, that want to tell you, look at this study from CNBC. Massachusetts is the 5th most business-friendly state in the nation. If you look at that study, the things that make Massachusetts great in that study, which are overly weighted, are things that the state government has nothing to do with. So if you really look at that study, you'll see that the folly of it. Most of you laughed when I said that. But if you truly have leaders who think we're 5th best, what are they going to do to deal with the problems that we have up there, where we have 1,000 different permits and regulations regulations, permits, and licenses managed by 100 different agencies that get involved? They're not going to do much. I would rather take the viewpoint of people like the Chief Executive Magazine that interviewed 500 CEOs and the Small Business and Entrepreneur Council. They say that we're in the bottom 5 when it comes to business friendliness, and they're talking about regulation, onerous taxation policy, etc. We know that's the case. We know it in our hearts that we're not 5th best, we're 5th worst. You need people who are going to go up there and go after those specific problems and tackle them.